20 soldiers received the Medal of Honor for killing unarmed women and children. That is not speculation or exaggeration. It is the official record of what happened at Wounded Knee Creek on December 29, 1890, the single largest number of Medals of Honor ever awarded for a single engagement in American military history. But what those medals actually commemorated, and why the government fought for over a century to keep them on the books, reveals something far darker than any battlefield citation could suggest. In the autumn of 1890, a spiritual movement swept across the reservations of the American West. They called it the Ghost Dance. Born from the visions of a Paiute holy man named Wovoka, the religion promised something that treaties and reservations had stolen: hope. Followers believed that through sacred dances and righteous living, the earth would be renewed, the buffalo would return, the ancestors would rise, and the white settlers would simply vanish, swept away not by violence but by divine intervention. To the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples confined to shrinking reservations where starvation had become routine, the Ghost Dance offered spiritual resistance in the face of cultural annihilation. To federal authorities and the agents tasked with controlling reservation life, it looked like something else entirely: the stirrings of another Indian war. Panic spread through the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Agents sent urgent telegrams warning of armed uprisings. Newspapers ran sensational headlines about hostile Indians preparing for battle. The Ghost Dance shirts, which followers believed could stop bullets, became evidence of military preparation rather than what they actually were: the desperate faith of a people with nothing left to lose. What no one could have predicted, what wouldn't fully surface for decades, was how that fear would be weaponized into something far worse than any imagined uprising. The government wanted the Ghost Dance stopped, and they knew exactly who to blame for its spread. Sitting Bull, the Hunkpapa Lakota leader, who had defeated Custer at Little Bighorn 14 years earlier, had allowed Ghost Dance ceremonies on the Standing Rock Reservation. To Indian Affairs agent James McLaughlin, this was intolerable. Sitting Bull remained too influential, too defiant, too dangerous a symbol of resistance. McLaughlin ordered his arrest. On the frozen morning of December 15, 1890, 43 Indian police officers surrounded Sitting Bull's cabin. They had been recruited from the reservation itself, Lakota men paid to enforce federal authority over their own people. When they dragged the aging chief from his home, his followers rushed to defend him. Shots were fired. Within minutes, Sitting Bull lay dead in the snow, along with his son Crowfoot and 6 of his supporters. 6 Indian police officers also died in the chaos. News of the killing spread across the reservations like wildfire. Ghost Dance followers who had believed themselves protected by spiritual power now faced a terrifying reality: the government would use lethal force to suppress them. Hundreds fled Standing Rock, seeking refuge with other bands. Among those who fled were members of Bigfoot's Miniconjou band, camped near the Cheyenne River. Bigfoot, also known as Spotted Elk, was already on the military's list of fomenters of disturbance. Now, with refugees streaming into his camp and soldiers massing across the territory, he made a fateful decision. He would lead his people south to the Pine Ridge Reservation, where Chief Red Cloud had promised safety. The consequences of that journey would prove catastrophic. But first, the military had to find them. Bigfoot was dying. Pneumonia had seized his lungs, and he traveled in a wagon, too weak to ride. His band numbered roughly 350 people, mostly women, children, and elderly, moving slowly through the bitter December cold toward Pine Ridge. They carried a white flag. They believed they were seeking peace. The 7th Cavalry found them near Porcupine Butte on December 28. This was the same regiment that had ridden with Custer to disaster at Little Bighorn. Many of its officers had not forgotten that humiliation. When Major Samuel Whitside intercepted Bigfoot's band, he demanded immediate surrender. The ailing chief agreed without resistance. The soldiers escorted the Lakota to a camp beside Wounded Knee Creek. That night, Colonel James W. Forsyth arrived with reinforcements, bringing the military presence to approximately 500 soldiers. They positioned 4 Hotchkiss mountain guns on a low hill overlooking the encampment, artillery pieces capable of firing explosive shells at 50 rounds per minute. The Lakota made camp in the valley below. Soldiers surrounded them on all sides. Army physicians, treated Bigfoot's pneumonia in his tent, a gesture of seeming goodwill. Rations were distributed. Some accounts describe singing and even cautious socializing between soldiers and their captives, but there was nothing cautious about those Hotchkiss guns positioned on the ridge, and Colonel Forsyth's orders for the following morning made clear what the army actually intended. Every weapon in that camp would be confiscated at dawn. The morning of December 29th began with tension masked as procedure. Soldiers formed a square around the Lakota camp, while officers ordered all weapons surrendered. Warriors were separated from their families and made to sit in a group while soldiers searched the tipis. The search was thorough and invasive. Axes, knives, and awls used for daily work were seized alongside the few rifles the band possessed. Most weapons were old, worn, nearly useless. But that wasn't enough. Soldiers began searching individuals, patting down men who had already surrendered what little they had. Then came Black Coyote. He was deaf, and he had not heard or understood the orders. He held a Winchester rifle above his head. Some accounts say he was trying to show he meant no harm, others that he was protesting the confiscation. Soldiers grabbed him. There was a struggle. The rifle discharged. In an instant, years of accumulated fear, hatred, and institutional pressure detonated into violence. What happened next defies any honest description as a battle. Soldiers opened fire at point-blank range. The warriors, sitting in the center of the camp, had already been disarmed. Many were shot before they could rise. Those who survived the initial volley ran in every direction, toward the ravine, toward the creek, toward anywhere that offered cover from the bullets. Then the Hotchkiss guns began. From the hill overlooking the camp, artillery crews unleashed explosive shells into the fleeing crowd. Each gun could fire nearly a round per second. The shells did not distinguish between warriors and women, between adults and children. They simply destroyed everything in their path. Dewey Beard, known also as Iron Hale, was 27 years old that morning. He would later testify to what he witnessed: soldiers shooting women who clutched infants, children cut down as they ran, bodies torn apart by artillery fire. His mother, his father, his wife, his infant son, all killed within minutes. The killing did not stop at the camp's edge. Cavalry units pursued survivors for miles across the frozen prairie. Bodies would later be found as far as 3 miles from where the firing began. Some had been shot in the back. Some had been shot multiple times. Some were small enough to carry. Within an hour, between 250 and 300, Lakota lay dead or dying. At least 25 soldiers also died, many killed by their own crossfire in the chaos. The 7th Cavalry had its revenge for Little Bighorn. The cost was measured in frozen corpses scattered across the snow. That night, a blizzard swept across the prairie. The army withdrew to Pine Ridge, leaving the dead where they had fallen. For 3 days, snow buried the bodies of men, women, and children in drifts that erased the visible evidence of what had occurred. When recovery parties finally returned on January 1, 1891, they found a landscape of frozen horror. Dr. Charles Eastman, a South Dakota physician working at Pine Ridge, was among those who searched the killing field. He found survivors, a few, impossibly still alive beneath the snow. He found infants frozen beside their dead mothers. He found bodies contorted in postures of flight, some still clutching children they had tried to shield. The recovery parties counted carefully. Their tallies would become evidence in debates that continued for generations. Civilian contractors were hired to bury the dead. They were paid $2 per body. The mass grave they dug was positioned on the same hill where the Hotchkiss guns had stood, the very ground from which the artillery had fired down into the camp. 146 bodies were interred in that single trench. More had already been removed by relatives or buried elsewhere. Photographers documented the burial. Those images, frozen bodies stacked like cordwood, being lowered into a common grave, would become some of the most disturbing visual records of American military action against Native peoples. General Nelson A. Miles was furious. As commander of the Division of the Missouri, Miles had overseen the campaign to suppress the ghost dance, but he had not ordered this. When reports of what happened at Wounded Knee reached him, he immediately relieved Colonel Forsyth of command and demanded a full investigation. Miles called it a crime against the country. He blamed Forsyth for tactical incompetence, surrounding the Lakota camp with soldiers positioned to fire into each other, deploying artillery against a captive band that had already surrendered. The friendly fire casualties among his own troops, Miles argued, proved how reckless the operation had been. The army convened an inquiry. It examined the evidence, and then it did what military inquiries so often do when the institution itself is at stake. It exonerated Forsyth completely. The colonel was restored to command within weeks. The dead Lakota were officially recorded as casualties of a battle, not a massacre, not an atrocity, but legitimate military engagement. And then came the final insult. 20 soldiers who participated in the killing received the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration. Some citations praised gallantry and bravery under fire. The fire, of course, had come from their own guns, directed at unarmed families. For more than a century, the official record called Wounded Knee a battle. Textbooks repeated the designation. Military histories treated it as the final engagement of the Indian Wars, a regrettable but inevitable conclusion to westward expansion. The Medals of Honor remained on the books, untouchable symbols of what the government refused to name. But the Lakota remembered differently. Survivors like Dewey Beard testified to congressional committees about what they had witnessed. Descendants preserved oral histories that contradicted the official narrative. Activists and historians assembled evidence that transformed public understanding of what had actually occurred beside that frozen creek. In 1990, Congress passed a formal resolution expressing deep regret for the massacre, the first official acknowledgement that the term battle had always been a lie. Efforts to rescind the 20 Medals of Honor have continued for decades, supported by military historians, Native American organizations, and even some Medal of Honor recipients who consider the awards a stain on the decoration's integrity. Those efforts have repeatedly failed. The medals remain in the official record, the mass grave remains on the hill, and the question remains unanswered. What does a nation owe when its highest honors commemorate its lowest acts? Wounded Knee was not an aberration. It was a culmination, the logical endpoint of policies designed to eliminate a people by eliminating their culture, their land, their leaders, and finally their lives. The ghost dance promised that the ancestors would return and the world would be made whole. Instead, the dancers were buried in a trench on a frozen hillside, their deaths decorated with medals that the government still refuses to take back. Some wounds do not heal, some shadows are never lifted, and some truths, once suppressed, demand their own kind of resurrection.